Hello, and thanks for tuning in to our weekly blockchain gaming news roundup. Today is Friday, the 16th of August. I'm a bit confused, it's still summer, brain's a bit all over the place. My name is Jenny Jordan. With me is my co-host as ever, John Jordan. Hi, John, how's it going?
Yeah, all good.
Good. In the middle of summer, it's quite a lot of little bits of news, kind of ahead of Gamescom. You think projects are eager to get their news out, but equally nothing sort of really major this week. But
No.
Let's kick off. Godzilla Games had the first playtest. Seems like that will be the first blockchain game to release on console, and they had announced that they would come on Xbox. So I think you had kind of expected it to come there first, but this playtest was actually on PlayStation 5. However, there are obviously still plans to come to Xbox too. So yeah, Off the Grid, like a kind of anticipated high-end third-person shooter. It's been in development for over 4 years, hasn't it, and raised over 100 million in funding. So certainly one of the more sort of deeper and higher quality blockchain games we can expect. The release date is not yet revealed, but it's likely to be sometime later in 2024. Oh, and 2 years on, Gabe Layden's Limit Break has... it's been quite quiet around that project for a bit. The kind of NFT collection, Digidaigaku, garnered a lot of attention with its Super Bowl ad in early 2023. And sort of people were quite excited, a lot of promise around their mobile game, and now kind of released updates on the other things they've been working on. A big thing has been the enforcing royalties for creators. And obviously they still have the mobile game, which they announced is still sort of in the making. They got a small but like a good team working on that still. So coming out of a time of silence. Eden Games, which recently launched their Autoverse kind of integrated beta on as part of the Autoverse ecosystem, a kart racer Cosmic Royale. We have been speaking to the Eden Games co-founder, David Nadal, to find out more about the game, which is the studio's first native Web3 game. Also sort of talking a little bit about whether the space actually needs another sort of motor-themed racer game, and why that sits really well in Web3 and how sort of blockchain can enhance the player experience there. The Lost Glitches has launched its open beta via Epic Game Store. They are deployed to gaming dedicated Arbitrum L3 XAI. Sorry. It's hard to say, I always struggle with that one. Guild of Guardians has released a new character card, which is an NFT, as far as I know, which you got. So you can tell us a bit more about what that means for the game, how that sort of spices up the game. Let's dive into that now, in fact. You tell us about that, John, because you've been getting it.
Guild of Guardians is Immutable's second game. So it's only one of two games that they're actually developing themselves. Obviously, most of the stuff on their platform is from third parties. So it is a mobile game through the app stores. It came out on the 15th of May. It's been, disappointing. Maybe not the word they would use, but they've said they've had 600,000 downloads and 250,000 monthly active users. That would have been in the first month. From the 15th of May to 15th of June, I'm guessing. They're still quoting those figures, so obviously the figures haven't gone up enough to quote a higher figure. And I guess the MAUs will have gone down because obviously when people download a game, then a lot of people sort of stop playing after a day or week, As someone who sort of plays every day, I think it sort of found its audience. I mean, that audience is probably much smaller than they would have hoped, but I think those sort of games are a really long haul to build up a sort of audience. And as is always the case in those games, I don't know how much I've spent, a few $100, I suppose, probably more than that, maybe $500 on various things in there. Actually, much more than $500, probably more like $1,000. But I'm nowhere near. I'm not like super powered. There's loads of players who are massively more powered than me. I wouldn't say I'm even in like the top. I don't know, maybe the top 10,000 or something. But there's a lot of people who are clearly spending a lot of time and a lot of money in that game. So I think to some degree it has found its audience. I guess the question with those games is, how can you scale that audience, or are you sort of stuck with? I think they've had a maximum of about 15,000 daily active wallets. Though it's not like a fully on-chain game, clearly. So quite what activity there you're sort of looking at in terms of wallets, I'm not entirely sure. Maybe leveling up would be sort of one part of it. Anyway, so they did actually release their first new character quite quietly about a month ago with an NFT mint that didn't go very well. So it just wasn't very popular. And this one, I think they've made a sort of bigger sort of release around it. Again, it doesn't seem to be very popular in terms of how, as far as you can see from the outside. So basically, you can go to the Guild of Guardians website and you buy what you do. The process they have for new characters is you buy some they call them prayer NFTs, and you buy them in different bundles. So obviously you can just buy one. I think one is $5, and you can buy 50 for whatever the slightly discounted thing. And then you burn them in a there's an altar system, which is what they use, and basically there's a gacha drop system there. So if you have trying to do the math now, I think if you basically have to burn 50 prayer NFTs to be guaranteed to get this character called JD, who's a legendary healer character. So sort of, if you're playing the game, quite useful. There's not a lot of legendary healer characters. So that's the sort of initial system in which you would sort of generate this character, and you can just tell from some numbers there, not many people have gone for it. So it's just I don't know how many of these. I don't think it's limited. There is a discount which is sort of limited. A limited number of prayers are discounted. I just don't think there's many people who are just getting involved in that. You can actually buy it in the game, not using using in-app purchase. So it is using blockchain, obviously it's an NFT, but you're just using your normal sort of Apple or Google Pay account. So you don't think you're doing blockchain. So some people, you can play that game without using blockchain at all. It's more expensive because you're paying all the Apple and Google 30% cut. So there's those there. So what I've just done is, like a lot of people, I just went to an NFT marketplace and just bought one that had been created for $50. So that's the sort of floor price in terms of just buying them. And it's actually a pretty good character, so I think it's sort of well worth $50. But it's I guess the interesting thing is, obviously there's not that many people who are going through this sort of origination process where you're sort of buying these prayers and then burning them and seeing what probability sort of happens, which I think is, I think that works for a really, really popular game where you kind of go, there's only 1,000 of them and the first 1,000, and everyone sort of piles in, and really, in a game where there's not that massive audience, then obviously some people are doing it probably as some sort of investment and trying to, buy loads of these in bulk and see if they can sort of generate some sort of edge there or something. I don't know, maybe guilds doing that sort of thing. But there doesn't seem to be that much demand on the prayer side, whereas you have to go and pick one. You just pick one up from the marketplace. One thing about it is, when you have one for $50, you then need another one to sort of level it up. So you end up sort of in this process of sort of needing more and more. So we may see over time. I'm looking at the price now. Actually, it's pretty much exactly the same, $45. So it's sort of as I say, like Guild of Guardians, I really like it. I don't think it's sort of done as well as they would have hoped. I still think there's enough in that game that they can work on it, and they've done some deals with guilds. They recently announced a deal with YGG in the Philippines, but that's not going to get you millions of downloads. That's going to get you a few 10,000 more downloads. So I think it's sort of how much they believe in this in the long term, and are they going to run this game for a couple of years at a loss. But but it's definitely not. But more generally, I would say games through the App Store are just really hard to scale. I think we see that with NFL Rivals, which has had 6 million downloads, but again, I don't think it has like tons and tons of players on the blockchain side of things. But I just kind of think you find for these sort of games, they don't have that sort of crypto like, buy an NFT for $100 now, and it's be worth $10,000 in a year's time, or 6 months' time. You just can't have that kind of crypto speculative side of these games going through app stores, because Apple and Google sort of limit what you can do. And I think that's a good thing. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think that's a really good thing. I think the games that are going to work out well are ones where they've really struggled to build an audience of Web 2 people and some Web 3 people. And it's going to take them a couple of years. Obviously, NFL Rivals has been going for a year already. And I think, you just have to put in the long yards, hard yards, isn't it? So yeah, but we'll see how they get on with that. But I'm still playing it at least.
Good. So in other news, there's been some funding. There's been Autoverse Studios, a US-based game developer, have announced they raised $8 million for Auto Legends. Can you tell us a bit about the studio? And I mean, $8 million doesn't sound like a lot, but in a fairly quiet investment field at the moment, it is quite significant. So why do you think they managed to do that?
So they're pretty well known in the. So they're based in LA. They're doing this racing game. It's a very much as you'd expect a sort of mobile. It's actually a PC mobile drag racing game. So you're not going around a track. You're just doing it. You're just racing in a straight line. So CSR Racing was the big sort of first free-to-play mobile game that did that, and Nitro Nation is a blockchain game trying to do that. So it's a well-known sort of genre, has been very successful, and it's all really about buying cars and tuning them up and getting all the different parts, and you can go into lots of granular detail for this sort of thing. So the team has actually got quite a good track record. They've made a whole bunch of sort of car games over the last sort of couple of decades. I guess most famously, they made a game called Racing Rivals that was bought by a company called Glue Mobile back in the day for $100 million. And that game wasn't super successful, but it did have this really cool mode. And this is definitely not 10 years ago. It's called the Pink Slip mode. And basically in this mode, if I raced you and I beat you, I got your car. So nothing to do with blockchain or anything like that. It was just purely, using centralized tech. But that was sort of one of the cool things they did. And I don't know how many people played it, and I don't know how they got around sort of money laundering, because obviously there's lots of weird things you could do. You couldn't cash out, I suppose, so it didn't really matter that much. But there was this sort of weird element. But you can imagine, I have a really cool car, and I give my son my iPad, and he ends up racing someone and losing my best card and all. Yeah, it causes lots of problems. So anyway, so blockchain sort of solves this, and this is one of the reasons these guys have got into blockchain. And so they're building out this whole drag racing thing where you're doing all the stuff with the cars. You have this whole guild system. You can tune other people's cars, because tuning's quite complicated if you're into that sort of stuff. You can be a car salesman. Heavy wagering. So as well as wagering cars, people could, if we were racing each other and we were the best players in the game, other people could wager on who's going to win. Again, that's be interesting to see how they pull that off, being an American company, and obviously that's. If you're doing that in a blockchain game, that clearly has implications for gambling. But they know what they're doing. They sort of, they're experienced. $8 million is a sort of reasonable chunk. It's not enormous. So whether they need some more, I'm not sure. They announced they're on. Did they announce they're on Immutable? I think they announced they're on. Yeah, on Immutable.
Yeah.
I think they will have probably had some additional funding prior to this that they haven't announced, or self-funding or something like that. 8 million probably isn't quite enough to get them to where they would need to be. But it seems to me this was probably a token round. They didn't really talk very much about the sort of structure of the investment. Interesting bunch of investors, most of whom are known in the space, but they're not sort of crypto degen investors. They're more sort of US investors who invest in some blockchain stuff. So we'll see how it turns out. Yeah, and I guess it's interesting that it sort of came a bit out of nowhere. I mean, I hadn't heard of these. I've heard of these people in the past. I hadn't heard they were doing blockchain. So it's sort of interesting that these sort of gaming veterans are still announcing new sort of blockchain projects. So.
Yeah. Thanks for that. A recurring sort of subject we've been talking about lately has been bots and kind of anti-bot measures from developers and how they see it, whether they see it as a problem or not, and whatnot. And this week, former Mythic Protocol, what are they called now? Let's have a look. They are called Conviction Labs. They launched a proof of exposure, which is sort of a way of trying to tackle bots through like sort of following, analyzing people's social accounts and their gaming history and so on. So it's very similar to what Pixels has been trying to do with their recent 2 months now, their sort of latest update. Changed their whole reward structure to try to tackle the large amount of bots, as it has sort of surfaced recently. I mean, what you've been saying for a long time, because you've been looking at these games. You had, like previously, you'd been looking at Splinterlands and Alien Worlds to get a sort of a sense of how large amount of bots these sort of play to earn / airdrop kind of games actually attract. And then we saw that with Pixels, that dropped 69% of its player base with a new update. And now most recently it has been Blocklords Dynasty. So can you tell us what you found earlier in the week, how you sort of came to the numbers?
Yeah, I think we've always known there's been loads of bots in blockchain, and I mean there's bots which are obviously just automated robot accounts, and there's extractive players as well. So that they're not exactly the same thing clearly, because one's human and one's not, but they're sort of in their end goal. They don't really care about the experience. They just want to extract value. So, obviously, I guess the prime example was Axie Infinity, which everyone was playing when they could make money, and when they couldn't make money, everyone stopped playing. So there was they lost like 99% of their audience, I suppose. But often, more recently, often what you see is games. I think are always internally they are focused on bots. Externally, they don't really like to talk about it very much. They all have anti-bot measures to some degree. That happens all the time. But then the interesting sort of points for people just outside of the project is when a game changes its reward structure quite radically, then often you see a big drop-off in daily active unique wallets, because either sort of players who were extracting don't have to, can't do it anymore, have to sort of buy some new assets or something like that. And the same thing happens for bots. So I mean, the first time I sort of really noticed it happened was when Splinterlands, the card game, basically forced you to. It brought in a whole new system of how you could get rewarded, and you basically you couldn't just have a basic deck of cards. You needed to go out and spend more money to buy decent cards, and that gave you more. Probably it gave you more headroom to get rewards. You didn't necessarily get those rewards. You had to still play, but and as you say, that they lost 68% of their audience pretty much overnight. Normally it takes a couple of days, but so that was the first time I saw it happen. And then it's happened a bit with Alien Worlds. They've lost they've not had a massive drop off like that, but they've just had sort of a couple of days where they've lost 45% of their audience. The big one happened this year was Pixels, where they did their Chapter 2, and they knew they were going to do it, and they sort of afterwards they sort of said, we broke the bots, and we're sort of quite happy about that. They lost 69% of their audience, so they went from over 1 million or 800,000 to about 250,000. It's sort of recovered back since, as we assume bots sort of rework out what they're going to do, maybe some players as well. And then the big one that happened recently, which I was sort of knew was going to happen or hoped was going to happen, was Blocklords Dynasty, which I've been playing a lot. It's a very sort of simple on-chain game on base. It's sort of a companion game to the big PC game, strategy game Blocklords. And this was a game where it was like an idle game. So you had these NFT characters and you did missions. They were just like idle missions, and you got rewards. And the reason I thought it was going to have a lot of bots in it, or we could see from the data it grew very quickly, was it was sort of part of a token airdrop. So you kind of thought token airdrops are particularly valuable for people because they're normally sort of time limited, and you put in a bit of resource and you might win a lot of tokens, which might be worth a bunch of money in the future. And when they airdrop, when the first bit of the campaign ended in Blocklords Dynasty, then it moved into another campaign, still the same gameplay and everything, but you only, in that case, you only earned in-game rewards that would boost your game account. And maybe in the long term you might get access to more Lords tokens or something, but it wasn't a discrete airdrop sort of thing that was before. And basically we saw, the game went from a peak of about 130 thousand DAUs wallets down to about sort of a 30,000 sort of, depending on your data supplier. But basically it lost like 80% in over 3 days. And this is not to sort of denigrate these games. I think I played all these games at various times, and it's just to sort of just something to be aware of. When you get a very popular game, a game with hundreds of thousands of wallets, that definitely, those games definitely, will be attracting bots, and probably those games are popular because they have extractive value. Whereas smaller games maybe won't have 80% bots because there's just nothing in there. But maybe some of those small games do have a lot more bots as well, but we just don't notice because they're on a much smaller audience. So it's not it's sort of a feature, not a bug, I suppose, to some degree. But clearly, all games go through these sort of cycles, and Pixels have been continuing to say all our updates, coming forward are to give players who are playing the game more of the rewards, and people who are not, bots, and people who are not playing in a deep level, less of the rewards. I don't think you can ever stop it, but that's just part of, I think, developers learning hard lessons about this is how you have to be and always be focused on this. And you start off with a fairly open sort of ecosystem, maybe, and an economy to encourage people to come in, and that means getting bots in as well. But over time, you focus it down, and maybe you end up with a very different game in terms of how that game works. Because that's how you find you sort of reward your key players. So a bit different, I guess, maybe to something like Guild of Guardians, where we sort of said it starts off sort of small, and can you grow it? Maybe some of these other more these games with crypto speculative elements, they start off big and have to sort of become small. But
no, but it's, like you say, it's just something that's good to be aware of. As obviously as journalists, you should definitely be aware of it. When we're quoting these big numbers or seeing a game that really sort of shoots off.
Yeah, no,
be
exactly.
aware that could be that it's actually an airdrop campaign ongoing, or something that's actually the reason why all these accounts are coming to that game. Anyway, there's been another project which is also likely doing sort of anti-bot measures, which is Pixelcraft. The news they've announced isn't exactly that, but they have these sort of members invitation where only members will be able to claim rewards. And but the news this week regarding Pixelcraft has been that they back in March they announced that they were building their Autoverse L3 gotcha chain on Base. It was initially built on Polygon, but it would migrate, as a lot of projects did at the start of the year, gone from Polygon to other chains. They went to Base, and now they've announced they have renamed their chain to Geist. So that's the kind of big news regarding that.
No, but
sorry, what did you want to say?
But no, it's interesting, as you said, that it's sort of they again are dealing. I mean, they're not a high volume sort of project. They've been around for 5 or 6 years. They're doing these sort of Ava Gotcha was their main game, and now they have all these sort of mini games based around these sort of ghosts, which is why they've called their thing Geist, I suppose. But they were very much in the sort of in the signaling around this is like how we don't want to be the biggest. We sort of want to make sure our players are rewarded. So they have this sort of system where if it's a little bit clunky at the moment. You have to go through an invite system, so I'm not quite sure how that works, but they have these what they call invited players, and they're the ones who can get the rewards. Anyone else can come in and play, but they just don't get the rewards. So quite why, obviously, there'll be an onboarding thing where people will start playing the game and go, I quite like this, and I want to be a rewarded player. But whether that gets the balance right of can you scale? Because obviously, all these games do need to scale their audience, unless they're getting more money out of their existing player base, which becomes very hard over time. most games will lose players over time because other games come in, or people just there's a natural churn, we call it. There's natural churn. You stop playing games after some period of time. No one, or very few people, play one game for 20 years. Some people do, EVE Online maybe, but even those games just tend to find it hard to grow. So I think, as I was sort of saying before, I think every project needs to find its balance. So not every project has the same balance, and maybe Ava Gotye is a bit more hardcore. I think it is. It's not a mass market game from that point of view, but there'll always be this sort of tension, I think, between you do want to grow, which means you want to give out more rewards to get people, but equally you don't want to give out too much. So I think that's I think it's a good marker to see that projects are publicly talking about these things in comparison to other projects where you just go, we just had 2 million wallets come, you just go, okay, we see where you are on that divide, It's a bot's telling you to shut up.
Well, yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah. So it's good to see from that point of view, I suppose.
Yeah, and they've also been very sort of keen on promoting themselves as like you say, a high quality, not high quantity.
Yeah.
There's none of this over 300 games and over millions and millions of accounts or whatnot. But they really, I mean, a bit similar to kind of how Ronin at least used to be in terms of we only sort of have a few limited invited sort of partnerships, partner games. Yes, and I know we're going to finish off now. I'm wearing my Planet MOJO cap today because the MOJO token is going live on Monday, the 19th of August, on base for in-app purchases. You're wearing your Web3 Gaming is Inevitable cap. Is that still the case? Would you say?
I've always think it's a nuanced question. Yeah, I mean, I think it depends what you think Web3 gaming is, I suppose. But yeah, I think the ability for people to own and trade in-game items is inevitable. Yeah.
Good. On that note, we are going to close up. Thank you for listening, and see you all next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.